Hey everyone, in today's video we're going to learn how to make Mirabel from the new Disney film Encanto. So I've got some Saraceno that I've coloured with some chestnut. Now this is the skin tone Saraceno, and I've just coloured that with a little bit of sugar flare chestnut. So I've rolled two sausages where it's quite thinner at one side than it is the other. And we're just going to use our little finger just to create an indentation where the back of the knee would be, and then flatten it for the foot and just roll between your finger and your forethumb. Now the foot is going to be covered by a shoe, so we don't need to put too much detail on the foot, just a general shape of what it's going to look like in the shoe is fine. You can, once you've bent it so that the foot is standing flat, just go between the finger and the forethumb just to make the ankle bit a little bit slimmer. And once you've done the other leg, we're going to prop that one and bend it slightly. So this is the kind of shape that you're going to go for. We're just going to cut our legs off at an angle and pop them to one side to dry. With the same colour fondant, we're going to make the torso. So you can see I've just rolled sort of like a rough egg shape and then flattened it. And then just between my fingers, I'm just running the torso area around just to create a waistline. And we're going to chop off the bulk at the top. We don't want the arms to be sticking too far out because obviously we're going to stick the arms on there anyway. Flatten sort of like away from the chest area, and that's going to give us our bust. And then just pinch between your finger and thumb just to create the neckline. So you can smooth it all out just where you've cut it off. And if you need to take any more off, you can always stretch out that chest area again like I'm doing, and then just pinch it together where you feel the neck is going to be. Now in this pose that she's doing, she's kind of got one shoulder up and one shoulder down. So what we're going to do is you're just going to create the neckline, give it a little bit more definition, and we're going to push up that one shoulder and push down the other shoulder. And just smoothing over everything once you've done it. Taking off the excess for the neck. And I'm just using a brush just to roll down from the neck onto the chest area. So that should give you a rough idea of the shape that's needed. Be careful not to make the chest area too big. She doesn't have much of a chest in the picture that I'm copying. We're going to cut down at the bottom of the hip area at an angle, and this is just going to allow us to stick our foot on the way it needs to be. So that angle that we cut the top of the leg off needs to go onto the torso. I've got a kebab skewer and I'm just going to pop that through the middle of the leg. Now my legs had maybe about 5 to 10 minutes just to firm up a little bit. So there shouldn't be much movement when you pop in the kebab skewer in. Obviously, if you live somewhere where it was quite hot or it was a sunny day today, I might be tempted just to pop it in the fridge for a little bit. Once you've got the kebab skewer through the leg, you may just need to go over some of the areas that might have changed shape a little bit as you was popping that in. Just smoothing it over and redefining the back of the knee. There's a tiny little bit of water that I've put on there just to make sure that the fondant actually sticks to the kebab skewer. Taking off just a tiny bit of the foot and just reshaping that so that she doesn't have a very long foot when the shoes are on. I've taken off some excess of the kebab skewer and I'm just giving it a little dab with a paintbrush just to make it a little bit wet. And then what we're going to do is we're going to put the torso onto that leg. I'm just going to push it into place, and a little bit of water just to join those two together. And then we're going to attach the other leg. So I've got a kebab skewer just going through the top part of the leg for this one, and I've just again wet it with the paintbrush with just a little bit of water to join those together. And then I've just got this bulk of fondant I'm just going to add onto the side there, just to give a little bit of a hip, so that when we put the skirt on, it kind of looks like her body is coming out to one side a little bit. Some white fondant that I've rolled out thinly. This is going to give us our top. So I've just rolled a strip out, and then I've just cut very loosely the neck part of the top. Just a little bit of water to stick this into place. Now it doesn't matter if the joins at the top aren't neat, she has got an extra part of the top that kind of goes around the neckline, and we'll be adding that later. So I've pinched together at the top, and I'm just going to cut off the excess. Same with the other side. We'll neaten up the back, just smoothing it over with a modelling tool, pinching it in at the waist so it looks like that. So for the skirt, I've got some fondant that I've coloured with turquoise and black. So I've got 3 different shades, starting with light, going through to dark, and we're just going to roll these out into light strips of fondant, cut them so they've got a nice neat edge, and we're just going to stick those together, and then just go over them with a rolling pin so that it's not showing any bulky lines underneath. Trim off at an angle, and this is going to be our skirt. So be careful that you measure the skirt against her body. You don't want it to go all the way to the bottom. You want it to show some of her ankle. And I've coloured some purple fondant, and I'm just going to trim that at the bottom of the dress. And then above that line, she's got like this tassely bit. So I've got the same colour again, just with the scriber needle. I'm just going along the edges just to create sort of like a tassel effect. It doesn't matter if it goes a bit messy, we kind of want it to look like it's got a bit of movement. And then trim off the top, and we're just going to stick this down with a little bit of water. Be careful when you're going with your scriber tool that you're not pressing too hard down, because you don't want it to go all the way through. You want to be able to pick it up in one line. And we're just going to stick that above the line that we've just put on there. And this is going to be the bottom of our skirt. So I'm going to trim off some of the top. And then I'm just with a brush, I'm just going to wrap it around and show you what it's going to look like roughly. And then with a brush, I'm just going to create some folds within the skirt, almost like a bit of a concertina, just to give it a bit of movement. I find it easier to do it on the table first than putting it on the figure. The figure can move about a little bit, and you might end up pushing a bit too hard on it while it's still drying. So just find it easier to do it like this and then stick it on the body. And you can create as many of these as you want. And then just wrap it around the body. And then with the lighter green, we're going to press that in to the top of the body. Create some lines with a scriber needle. And then a thin strip of the lighter green to create kind of like a belt or the top of the skirt. We're just going to stick that on with a little bit of water. Next we're going to do the arms. So the first arm is quite a simple shape. You're just going to roll a sausage that's slightly thinner at one side than it is at the other. And then we're going to fold it in half just with the scriber needle and sort of point the elbow This is going to be the arm that sort of wraps around the body. Next, we're going to do the same sort of shape, but this one we're going to flatten the pointy bit, and that's going to give us the hand. And we're just going to roll between our finger and forethumb just to create the palm. A line across the middle, and then we're going to cut out the thumb. So the line across the middle allows us a bit of movement, and then we're just going to divide it into two and then divide those bits into two. Some lines across the fingers, and this is just going to allow us to be able to bend the fingers into the shape that we want. So the little finger is the one that's curled the most in, and then as you go through the hand, they're slowly releasing until the index finger is pointing. So it can get a little bit fiddly, and you may have to put the hand down for a little bit just to allow it to cool down before you carry on working on it. Just use your scriber needle to get into the joins. So you should have something that looks like that. And so we're going to fold that bit, chop off the excess, and we're going to wrap this arm around first. So that's going to wrap around the waist, and then we're going to attach the other arm on just with a little bit of water. So you're going to fold it in half, and you kind of want it so that the forearm is in front of the back of the arm, and then we're just going to cut off at an angle so that we can attach this to the body. And you may need to let this cool for a couple of minutes just so that it holds up its shape. So just attach it with a little bit of water, like that. So now what we're going to do is we've got some white, and I've just got a cookie cutter. We're going to create the shoulders for the top and attach those on. And again, it doesn't matter if it's neat because we're going to use this strip here just to cover. So we're going to use the crinkly bit of the cookie cutter. We're going to cut out the neck, and then we're just going to wrap this around, and that's going to cover up the joins that we had before. And now we're going to move on to the face. So I've got an egg-like shape. We're going to use our little finger just to create the lines across for the eye sockets, using your little fingers to create the holes for the eyes, and we're going to sort of try to define the nose just using your fingers, and then with a Dresden tool just defining that little bit underneath the nose. And at this point it's just a lot of smoothing until you get that rough shape that you're looking for. Put in some nostrils, and then just with your Dresden tool we're going to sort of separate the side of the nose from the face. And just remember to always smooth over everything that you've done to get rid of any lines. You can re-go over areas if you need to. Sometimes when you're smoothing you can pull things out of place. Some dimples, sort of I would say midway where the eye socket is going to be. And then with your knife you're just going to create a line across, using the knife to go in and lift up slightly for the top lip. So just a little bit of pressure, and then using your finger to push that top lip up. Going in with a Dresden tool if needed. And then pushing from the lip up to the cheek area. And again just going in and smoothing over anything. Using the Dresden tool just to pull down the lip area. Now she's got the one side of her mouth comes down a lot lower than the other, so you're going to pull down one side, and we're going to pop in some white fondant just for the teeth. Now I like to put a little bit in first and then add some more just to build it up. I find it easier to get it into the mouth that way. and just using your Dresden tool just to push it into place. Once you're happy with that, we can then go ahead and finish off the mouth. So one side of the mouth is quite chunky, and then as you get over to the other side, the lip gets quite thin. And it does look a bit weird at the minute because it's got no hair, it's got no eyes. You just have to bear with it. Using the knife just to go in over at the side again, and then just recreating that dimple area. A little cupid's bow in the middle with a small ball tool. And again, just a lot of smoothing. We're going to take off the excess of the face. So I like to line it with a brush first, and then just use my fingers just to pull down the excess. Repointing the chin. And then we're just going to use a knife to mark in the teeth. And then we're going to mark in the corners of the eyes just with the Dresden tool. And then we're going to use that same Dresden tool just to mark out the eyes. So I always start with the top lid first. Now this is a cartoon character, so it has got quite big cartoony eyes. And the bottom of the lid is never straight, it's always dips down just a little bit. And we're not pushing in too deep, but around the corners of the eyes where it needs to be deepest. With a little bit of white fondant, we're just going to input that into the eye socket, being careful that when you're pushing it in, you're only pushing the edges in, and you're leaving sort of like that curve in the middle. We'll do the same for the other eye. Now I've got some of the same colour fondant that I used for the skin. Just rolled some tiny balls, and we're going to pop them in for the colours of the eyes. So we're just going to push it in where it roughly goes, and then you're just going to gradually make that circle bigger, just pulling it out with the Dresden tool. I find this the easier way to do it rather than having to paint it on, because you're in control of where you put the fondant, and you can stretch it to any size that you want to. And we'll do the same for the other side. And then I've got some chestnut sugar flare. I'm just going to paint around the outside of the eye. And then with a very damp brush, we're just going to paint some colour in there. So we're just going to pull the colour from the outside, and we're going to shade in the top to make the top a bit darker. And then I've got an even darker brown, and I'm just going to re-go over the outline of the eyes again. Again, pulling some of that darkness down into the eye colour. So the brush doesn't need to be too wet. I've got some black balls, and we're just going to use them for the blacks of the eyes. And then with a strip of black fondant, we're going to create the eyelashes. So I like to do like an eyeliner rather than paint individual lashes on. Trim off the excess, and again just push that into position with the Dresden tool. You'll do the same for the other eye. Tiny little white blob for the reflector in the eye. And then we're going to paint on some lipstick and the underneath kind of like eyeliner. So for the eyeliner, I've used the chestnut brown, just a very thin line of colour. I've got some black just to make the eyeliner just a little bit thicker as it comes to the outside of the eye. Again, the brush doesn't need to be too wet at this point. And then I've got some light pink that I'm just going to use for the lips. And then I'm just going to add a little bit of chestnut to that colour as well, just to make it sort of like a pinky brown. So it'll take around about an hour for this to dry. So if you are a bit clumsy and get paint everywhere, I would paint this when the hair is on. So her eyebrows are quite thick and bushy for this one. So I've just got some dark brown and I'm just painting on kind of like really little lines just to create sort of like a big thick bushy brow. And you'll do the same for the other side. Sometimes I like to blot off any excess colour and then just go over the eyebrow. So I've got some green fondant and I've just rolled it really thinly, and now I'm just creating these circles for the glasses. So I'm just pinching that bit together just to make it stick, and then I've just taken off any excess if it's a little bit too big and then just repinching it over. And then I've got this scalpel tool, and it's quite wide at the bottom, so I'm just using that just to go in and just go around in a circle just to make sure that the glasses are circles. This is how I do the ears. So a blob of fondant and then just with the end of the brush just pushing them in. We're going to put a cocktail stick through the neck. Now her head is a bit on the side, so we're going to pop the head on the side. And then just with some black fondant we're going to create some curls. So you can see I've just rolled a sausage that's pointy at one side and I'm literally just twisting it between my fingers. And then I'm just pushing that on and building it up from the back of the neck up onto the sides of the head and then onto the scalp. So I've literally rolled quite a few of these and I'm just adding and building on. Being careful that I'm not applying too much pressure whilst I'm doing it because everything is still drying. You could give it an extra day if you wanted to be a little bit more heavy-handed. We're just going to build up at the sides. So she's got quite big curly hair that's quite short. And her parting is just slightly over to one side. So be careful not to cover the eyebrows because these are visible with her hair. And just around the front of the face she's got sort of like smaller curls that don't go as far down. I'm just going to keep building up. Now be careful when you get to the middle of the hair that you're not pressing down in the middle, because you kind of want it to come up a little bit. So you don't want to end up with like a really flat, big parting in the middle. So I'm just rolling some smaller parts now just to go around the tops of the hair and around the face area. So it can be a little bit fiddly and you just want a small amount of water just to stick it all together. We're going to prop the glasses on. I've just wet around the nose, and if any part is touching any hair or anything like that, I've just wet that part as well. And then we're just going to join them together with a little bit of white fondant that we're going to paint gold. Just using your Dresden tool to push it into place. And now it's time to paint the detail on the dress and the top. So I'm outlining the frills just with some black paint. So it doesn't have to be identical, this part, but we just want to kind of roughly mimic what she's actually got on. So once you've outlined the black, she's got these like little butterflies that sort of go between the black parts on the neck collar. So I'm just roughly painting these on. I've got a very small thin brush. I think it's 00. And just the tiniest little bit of water. That's allowing me just to paint this really thin line. And now what I've done is I've got some super white, the Sugar Flare powder, and I've just mixed this with some of my Sugar Flare colours, just to create kind of like, not a pastel-y colour, but a different kind of finish as to what the actual paint would have given me on its own. So we're just now replicating some bits of her dress. So like she's got some big flowers, and she's got some squiggly lines and love hearts and butterflies, and I'm just painting these all over the skirt just as roughly as I can, starting with one colour at a time. So I've done pink, then I've mixed some green, I'm just adding in some leaves and extra squiggly lines, just trying to pick out the things that stand out the most from the skirt that she's got on, and just recreating those on this dress. So it didn't take me too long. You could probably get away without doing this part, but I just think, you know, it brings the whole character together, and just makes it look more like the actual character. So now I'm just going in with some pink love hearts and squiggly lines. Again, these are all mixed with the super white. I will put a link in the description box of everything that I've used and the colours that I've used. And if you do get stuck with anything, you can always pop me a message. So now just some yellow. She got some of this detail on her shirt as well, but not too much. But one thing that I did see that she did have on, so she's got pink slippers, so I'm just popping those on now. So just a thin piece of fondant, putting it over the top, and then I'm just cutting off the excess. But she did have like this pink butterfly that was on her shoulder, so I quite thought that was a nice touch to put on as well. So the same pink as the slippers. So I'm just using my Dresden tool just to neaten up the edges. So just got sort of like a teardrop shape of fondant in pink, and there's one butterfly wing, and there's the other butterfly wing, and I've just placed this second wing so that it's at a bit of an angle, so it kind of looks like it's fluttering. And then we're just going to paint that bridge part of the glasses in gold. So I've got a Sweet Sticks gold. And I'm just going to add that on. And that's how I made Mirabel from Encanto. So I hope you liked today's video. If you did, please give a thumbs up. Don't forget to comment down below. And don't forget to subscribe as well. If you'd like to see more of my videos, please click the links on the screen now. Thanks for watching.